reasons, as well as previous funding, current more so other reasons.
There's a ton of stuff that could be impacting the real estate. Are all shifts bad shifts?
No.
No, some shifts can be good, right? When we talk about what kind of market that we're in, there are really three types of markets that we kind of talk about. Right? What are those? A buyer's market. Yep. A buyer's market in which the conditions favor the buyer. A seller's market in which the conditions favor the seller. We're at the balance market. We're kind of in the sweet spot. You don't really have any advantage or disadvantage to either a buyer or seller. We're kind of on you. Right? So if we're in a buyer's market, what does that mean?
You can negotiate with your buyer, you have much better chances of getting things for them.
Right.
Prices might be more negotiable, and you're not killing each other.
What basic principle makes it a buyer's market? What are the mechanics of a buyer? What? Yes, you have more. You have a lot of inventory, a lot of homes for sale. You've got fewer buyers, right? So you've got more homes for sale than you do buyers wanting to go out there, right? Which means we have more supply than we have demand, which leads to stuff sitting on the market, which ultimately, if you're going to compete, you have to reduce your price or other things, right?
Right.
So if that's what leads to a buyer's market, what then leads to a seller's market?
Giving over
I was going to say, you can do all the heavy lifting. Yeah, right. But if that's a buyer's market, what would be a seller's market? You got fewer homes for sale than we do buyers of items, right? So our pool of inventory, our homes for sale, has shrunk substantially, or it's just smaller than the massive pool of buyers or demand we have out there. If you have multiple people buying for the same property, that's a good position to be in as a seller, right? Which typically leads to what? Multiple offers, which typically drives up the price, right? And then a balanced market would be you kind of have the amount of inventory on the market and the amount of homes for sale at any given time kind of matching that buyer demand, right? So it's a relatively stable market. It still might be competitive here and there, it might not be competitive, but the inventory is moving at a good pace at a good clip. There's nothing crazy going on. So now we start asking ourselves, okay, we know that shifts occur in the housing market due to what's going on in the economy. We understand the three basic types of market: buyer, seller, balance. So once we know those things, we begin to ask ourselves, okay, well, what situation are we in right now? And where do we think we might be headed? Right? So I think it's fairly common knowledge. Even if you ask the general public or a consumer what kind of market we're in, they're going to tell you we're in one. The news media says we're in a seller. The news media says we're in a seller's market. We've been in a seller's market for many years now, right? It's been good to be. It's also been very good to be a buyer. Don't get me wrong. It's just hyper competitive if you're a buyer. But I think you would agree, and having talked about this a couple different times in talking with several agents out there, there seems to be a little bit of easing on that demand. And I wouldn't even say it's an easing on demand, it's more an easing on affordability, right? Which is taking some people out of the picture, shrinking that pool of buyers. We still have a demand for a property, especially without they can afford it, right? We're still seeing it be a very healthy market for sellers, but that just crazy gangbuster mode we were in for a year or so seems to be subsiding a little bit. Not necessarily 20 or 30 offers on a property, might be back down to a handful, which is still pretty crazy, right? So, but when we look at things that are going on in the market, we have to understand what impacts, right? So we have something that's kind of been doing this for a long time. It's now recently begun to do this and is likely to keep doing that. What is that? Interest rates. Absolutely. So interest rates are. What are interest rates? So first off, what have interest rates done for probably the last 5 or so years? Maybe a little bit longer. They've been very, very, very stable, right? Very stable at very low, historically low rates, right? When you have historically low interest rates, what does that actually mean for the economy? What does that mean for money? What does that mean for people to buy a house? Absolutely. When your interest rate is super low, your money goes a lot further, right? You can buy a $500,000 home and your payment is a lot less than it would be if the interest rate, were 6 or 7%, right? So as interest rates go up, buyer affordability goes what? Down, right? So if the interest rate was 3%, your affordability might have been $500,000. If that's at 6%, it might go down to 4, right? And now you can begin to see how that impacts the sellers and how it impacts demand and how it impacts the market, right? So there's something else that's kind of been going on here. This could be a good graphic for interest rates. It could also be a good graphic for what else right now? Inflation, absolutely. Inflation, gas prices, cost of food, price of lumber. Yeah, absolutely. Is it?
It's adjusting.
Now, why would that
From
happen?
95,000 to 75.
Really? I had a buddy of mine. Really? I had a buddy of mine tell me the other day he and his dad run a business, and you always drive huge, massive trucks. So I asked the other day, about fire department, how? I said, what do these gas or diesel prices do to your business? He said, our last bill was $21,000 for the month, which is like more than double. But here's what people sometimes don't realize is they don't take a step back. Oh, yeah, these gas prices that really suck, inflation. Yeah, this. Well, when a business sees their cost of business increase by that amount, what does that mean for the consumer? Exactly, because our small business owners are good people, but they also have to feed their families, they have to pay their employees, right? So they have to have a margin in their business of profit. So if their expenses go up dramatically, that's going to chip away at or completely eliminate their margin. The only way they can offset that usually is to increase their prices. You can only cut expenses so much, right? And when they increase their prices, well, that ends up impacting them. Right? That's how we see inflation. That's how we see prices go higher. Right? That's what's happening. And then compound that with interest rates. It's interesting to hear the price of lumber is going down. I'm curious to see what new builds are doing, right? If the amount of new construction is decreasing, well, that impacts your demand for lumber, which might drop the price. Pretty interesting. Okay, so we talked about interest rates, we talked about inflation, right? If you can like an increase in interest rates impacts affordability pretty significantly. Right? But folks, this is a ×2 double whammy. We're increasing interest rates and we have inflation, right? Well, one of the reasons we're increasing interest rates is to combat inflation. But when you're looking at a home buyer out there right now, especially one that's been looking maybe for a few months, their entire ground is shifting beneath them in terms of the housing market, what they can afford and what they can, like their expectations are changing on a daily basis regarding what they thought they were going to get for a certain price and what they could afford to what they can now, right? So the moral of the story is helping our buyers get what they want sooner rather than later, although I know it's sometimes hard, is doing them a great service. We need to help them understand, hey, if you're on the fence or you're not serious, this is something you kind of want to do, now's the time, right? Anyway, that's a long way of me saying that if we acknowledge what's going on in the market and we can anticipate that a shift is occurring right now, economically, it's happening. So the next question is, how is that going to impact the housing market, and what are we going to do about it? Right, which is the whole purpose of today's class. It's not to over alarm everybody. Me personally, I don't think we're going to see some sort of complete reset, earthquake, housing shift, housing crisis like we did not that long ago. This is just us trying to react to and correct supply and demand. What's that?
Why would that not happen?
My personal belief is this: what led to the last one had a lot to do with mortgage fraud. This one, in my opinion, right now we're combating purely supply and demand. And part of that is because of the last incident, we stopped building a lot of homes. So our inventory of homes is pretty low right now. Quite a bit. Because they were building. Yep. It will be interesting to keep our eye on interest rates to see how much they're going to keep increasing. How many more times and how high they get will be interesting.
I'm not afraid.
What's that?
Excuse me, I'm not, it's opportunity. I don't mean to speak quietly.
Come on, louder.
I'm not afraid. When I started building houses, I paid new construction interest rate,
Oh my goodness.
21%.
What is that?
I had 47 houses under construction. And amounted to $1 million for the interest. I've never seen an electric meter go out that fast.
Oh, hey,
But I was young and stupid.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
land was cheap, so I bought a bunch of lots for $9,000, 44 at one time.
Yeah.
Built out, I cranked the houses out in 25 days.
that's amazing.
But there was nothing going on like this.
Right.
So I already had a plan in place. I knew what my timeline was. The houses do not stay empty.
But to your point, John, the market and those interacting with the market, they price in the cost of doing business, right? So no matter what interest rates ultimately become, that just gets priced into business. It's priced into the it's priced into stuff. Right? Ultimately, the consumer is the one that will deal with that.
6% point.
Absolutely. There's a whole host of ways. It just means that the way business is being done and how people are conducting it will change and modify to meet what's going on in the market, and your cost of business or the way of doing business might slightly change or adapt. What are some examples of the ways of how we do business right now in real estate is different than even what it was just 3 or 4 years ago? What are some examples? When's the last time? Well, I should ask you this way: if you were in business then, you're in business now, are you negotiating inspections the same way you did 3 or 4 years ago?
I
No.
mean, sometimes.
Right. Let me ask you this: have you done deals? How many deals have you done this year where you didn't even have an inspector? A few, right? That would have been unheard of not that long. Of those that had inspections, how many actually had inspections? They did. Great.
All of them.
It wasn't contingent
But-
on inspection.
Right.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is the inspection phase used to be a much more intensive. We have to negotiate this back and forth, right? Because the market. Nowadays, right? Nowadays, it's like, how dare you ask me something for the inspection?
Yeah, right. Take the next buyer.
Right. That's the example of the way that the business is conducting change. Right. That's just one example. And so you'll see as the market changes, we will adapt to how we conduct business, right? When's the last time the sellers bought a home warranty? It's just not happening right now, but we'll start shifting back to things like that. So,
I interject really quick. I think, just speaking specifically from our experience over the last 2 weeks, we got to this great shift of taking place.
so tell me more about
So depending on the listing, we do both sides. From the listing standpoint, you're not priced well.
that. With the market.
If you are not
with the
priced
market.
well with the market, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're not going to get very many showings. They're going to give you feedback, and you're going to have to do things to improve your listing or add to the listing on top of that price reduction, or you're not going to be seeing that same result. If you have a great listing, price it greatly, yes, you will get multiple offers. Yes, it could be 20,000 over asking. Just happened yesterday. Depends on the property, right?
Yeah.
On the buy side, I just got one down $50,000 and my buyer said no and walked away.
Let's see. In Rochester.
Married up.
Okay.
So varying, but there is no like norm anymore. It's
Right.
so specific on the property
Yeah.
that it's like you can give the expectations to your client,
Yeah.
but you really don't know
Right.
until you get into that nitty gritty.
Well, what's happening is we're at a point right now where the consumer and some agents are trying to catch up to the market, right? Like change has happened, but some people are. What it is they're still in denial. Because prices have been doing this, or demand has been doing this, and now because of what's occurring, it's still this, but it's leveled off a little bit. And what people were doing here not that long ago is, you could throw a house on fire. This is what people try to do, right? They would have no qualms about pricing well above market because even they can still maybe sometimes don't. But now what's happening because we're leveling off is you can't really necessarily push the envelope as much as you used to be. Previous market conditions to still find success, right? Because you need to be much more in line with market value or really just slightly above market value to test the waters. Successful. If you're still trying to go way above market value, things are slowing down. But what happens is, number one, many agents haven't even yet recognized that because they don't pay attention or dial in or do enough business to build that or feel that happening. And if the agents don't know about it, the consumer certainly doesn't, because we're the number one educator of the consumer, right? So it's when enough agents realize and are communicating to the consumer, hey, things are throttling back a little bit. It's super critical we flash your mind with the market, or if you want to test the waters, just like we know, can't go outrageously above market value. Because this slowdown is happening during what time of year? Yeah, which is traditionally what real estate. Right. That's why I keep that's what has my attention the most is we're experiencing a slowdown, we're experiencing a throttling back, and it's happening during the time of year where we usually throttle up. Right. So if we're starting to experience this during our typical busiest time of year, that shows me that yeah, we're definitely taking a couple of steps back in terms of what we're experiencing in the market. And as we come into quarter 4 and quarter 1 of next year, that will be a really good indicator of how impactful of a shift are we talking about. Are we shifting closer back to normal and balance, or are we going even beyond? Right. Some of that will have to do with what interest rates need to do.
My input in regards to that.
Yeah.
We have interest rates going up. We also have super inflation on the price of fuel. So people are driving back and forth 30 miles to Rocky twice a day.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped at Costco and get fuel and I look around and get 3 miles to the car. I said, how much your pound? I said, I didn't know.
Careful, John, this is being recorded. Where'd you get your phone?
I don't remember.
I'm teasing.
But
Jokes are welcome.
I hear him talking on TV about how high expensive groceries are. And I go buy Silver Lake Foods and I buy a sirloin. I mean, I go buy a ribeye steak for $8.88 a pound.
Right.
I gotta buy 14 pounds of meat. Yeah. That is not a bad deal.
You bring up a good point. Right. Yeah. I'm going to use the Twin Cities Metro, but you can apply this to Rochester too, right? I'm using the Twin Cities because they have a bigger suburban area, right? So let's call this is the metro, right? And then you have this outer ring, which are the suburbs, right? The subs. And then even beyond the suburbs, you kind of have this additional outer ring, which is kind of like, I'm going to call it like your rural suburbs, right? So I'll call that our best. Yeah, your rural suburb, right? They're close enough to still be able to drive. Like this is like a 30-minute drive, right? 20 to 30 minutes I could be downtown, right? Down here, it's maybe closer to 45. Sure. So more. Exactly, right? But they'll still go. Well, oh, by the way, within these two rings right here, everything you need is within close distance, right? You are close to goods, right? So gas prices, they suck. But I'm not terribly inconvenienced, right? My commute, yeah, it's getting me there, but I only have to drive a mile or so to the grocery store, this, that, and the other. It's not crushing. Yeah. You come up to a place like the rural suburbs where, you might have some goods, but you don't have a grocery store where you right? Your commute either to here or here is longer. So the gas prices are much more effective. Oh, by the way, in your rural suburbs, what kind of vehicles are typically going here?
Truck.
Yes. Yes. Your vehicles that are your gas consumers, right? Gas guzzlers, yeah. So when you look at this segment of geographic area and housing and population, and you look at inflation and specifically gas prices, who is really truly feeling it? These folks right here. Every time they get in the car to drive somewhere, they're thinking about it, right? I'll hop in the car to drive the Cubs. I don't think about that. It's just, I'm not going to burn a lot of gas to go to the grocery store. these folks got a plan. Hey, if I'm going to Target, I'm going to Cub, I'm going to wherever, like, first off, we're going into town, we're doing all our shopping, and we're gonna stop at the bank and whatever, right? This is no longer onesie choosy trips, right? It's a big deal. Which also means, how does that begin to change people's opinion of where they might want to buy their home? Right.
And we already see that normally, so our kind of things, you know, passing, that black people, this, 30 minutes around, you know,
Right.
Toyota, Elgin, sort of, things, they go to the next ring, you know, Dodge, you know, whatever, and that's like our world.
Right.
And so if you're more than 30 minutes away, you know, plan everything accordingly, so you can see those prices.
Right.
You're gonna see that majorly affect those prices.
Right.
Especially if you're on a busy road.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it comes full circle because as buyers are taking all this into account, buyers who may have once considered or found these geographic areas to be appealing might now be more drawn to what? Yeah,
That
potentially,
balances out.
potentially, right? So, but what has to happen to the value of these homes?
they have to-
Exactly, right? If all of a sudden, if demand in these outer areas begins to dwindle a little bit, well, that's going to begin to impact their local housing markets. Right? And you've got, you know, folks here. What I'm trying to say is, you might have a lot of people that were maybe open to a 45-minute commute. Now say, hey man, I want to steer us in that 30 to 20-minute ring because of gas prices. Right? So just, and I'm also trying to give awareness as to who is really feeling the pinch of gas prices and just prices increasing in general. People have to drive a long ways.
When people are complaining about groceries, well,
Yes.
guess what? Transport is what brings your groceries to the store. So it costs 10 times the amount for transport. Yes, your cleanup boxes are going to double in price.
That gets back to the story I shared earlier. My buddy, he owns a small business where we've seen that expense dramatically impacting these passed on to the consumer. Right? So, which is this, the double whammy. If these folks are already feeling the pinch, the prices are going up. What are they like? What's going to happen to their family budgets or how much money they're spending? Right, it's going to decrease. What's that going to do to the overall economy?
So I got.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
The prices, the demand is higher on the side.
Yep.
Okay, from the people on the other. That drives the selling price.
Yep.
You talk about affordable housing, you can't afford to buy the subs anymore, so they end up in the RS.
Yeah. Well,
They got rid of their travel. They bought something that is a hybrid, and they get 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I just.
No, you're exactly
I've been
right.
through this conversation with a consumer.
Right.
So what I'm sharing with you is what's going on.
Yeah.
Why are we buying in West Stockton? We can't afford to buy more.
Right. Well, and so then to your point, if there's a little bit of a shift, you know, into the suburban area, what does that then lead to? When you start to see more of the suburbs? That's not wrong. That's not wrong. But if we have a lot more people. Like, let me ask you this: what do you keep seeing built right outside of our building? Apartments. That's what will happen, right? You know, by the way, all those buyers that were at the very bottom of that affordability, the affordability pool, well, when interest rates went up and they got priced up, what are they doing? Probably moving rent. Because they can't afford to buy.
Or they can buy, I'm gonna build a couple of units that they can, like an apartment.
Perfect, right?
But it's housing.
That's what you're going to see.
Pardon me? No. It's more elegant than it.
Oh, there you go. It's all about what you call it.
I'm not buying it.
Well, the other interesting thing too is this, you'll begin to see this, this will begin to impact what is getting built, right? You will see the size of homes in the suburbs being built shrink a little bit. You will see the size of the homes and the developments occurring in some of these more rural suburban areas. They're going to go much more back to loaded entry level, right? That's just going to start happening. Why? Because prices meet the demand of need. So this is just very interesting to know and be aware of, and just know for full circle what's happening, right? And as you drive in the metro, you'll see no shortage of apartment buildings going up. That's why we have a housing shortage right now, right?
Yeah,
There's
so I'm just
really-
keep putting that luxury apartment for $1,200 for a one bedroom. That's great. That's
Yeah.
definitely gonna help us.
How much are you for a two-bedroom?
You
How
know,
much are they for a
Well,
two-bedroom?
like 6 months.
Oh, really? So, needless to say, there are some things that we could be doing within our design.
There are some things that we could or should be doing in our business really to help us make sure that we're maximizing how much business we can get. Right? Because what's the best way? I should say the best way. What are some really good ways to help protect yourself or insulate yourself from a less than ideal shift in the real estate market?
Sorry, is that
There we go. How can you protect yourself?
Double down on the cost.
So when you say double down on your costs, what do you mean by that?
Reduce on that.
So cut expenses. And the inverse of that would be you might want to increase your investment on your best ROIs, right? So what you might do is, this might be counterintuitive. You might say, okay, I'm going to cut my expenses, I'm going to reduce my risk, and make sure that I'm not overspending, right? But I also, at the same time, might want to look at what are the best payoffs I have, what are my best returns on investments, because actually I might want to start doubling down on. I might want to increase some of those, right? To help, especially when to decrease expenses. The best thing you could do in your business is decrease an expense that's really not getting you anything, and then pump that money into something, increase it that's giving you a really good ROI, right? That's a double win, okay? But if you don't have anything that you feel super confident in, it's like, hey, if I put more money here, if I put some over here, it might be a greater return, then just reduce the expense, right? And this, again, remember I said these are principles we should really almost always be looking at our business for. But here's the deal. What happens when times are good and business is good, do you, as you closely monitor your expenses? Yeah, not necessarily always as close. I mean, there's a huge difference when your bank account has $5 in it, and you're getting ready to, and you're looking at what you should be spending money on, versus when your bank account has $5 grand in it, right? So sometimes we almost always have to adopt that mindset of I got little to nothing in that bank account, and if that's my situation, how am I going to handle it? Because when you feel comfortable, you either you don't look at it as often, or it just doesn't speak to you to be doing that on a regular basis, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, so there's a couple things you can do. We're going to look at a shift. We're looking at a potential shift. We're looking at expenses. We're looking at investments. We're looking at our return. What else should we be doing? To say it's not even something like that.
Business.
Yeah, we're going to
What double down on.
right. So let me ask you this: you know, let's say you do 30 deals, right? And you have a feeling that the market might shift, and those 30 deals can be cut in half to 50, right? So if you're thinking that the amount of business you do could be cut in half, what's a natural thing you might think you should do in order to help offset that, should that occur? Yeah, that's one of them. That's up here. What did she say? She said spend less. So we're cutting our expenses, right? Well, let me ask you this way. If every year I do a certain amount of effort and activity that generates me 30 units, and I'm worried that that same level of effort is only going to generate 15 deals next year, what might I do in the level of prices? I got to look at my activity, right? And increase my activities. Really increase the activities that matter, right? Money making, exactly. One's one of the biggest money making activities in real estate.
Double down on the same client.
Yes, lead generation, really client contact, right? Client contact, your database, right? So we're going to increase our effort, right? You have to work harder. Would you agree that you have to work harder in a down market? doing a good market. Yeah, I mean, the definition of working harder might be different. There you go. So increase your effort. Really, what we're going to look at are increasing the size of our database, right? And probably increasing our, I'm going to put our contacts, but what I'm not going to use touches. That's what we're increasing our touches. Because we're adding contacts to our database, but how often we touch them probably needs to increase, right? Not a physical preview way. We send you emails and call you in half a minute. So, and again, aren't these all things we should already be doing? The answer is yes, right? But if we know, hey, every year, in these good years, I've done 2 client appreciation events, I've kind of been haphazard with lead generation, I've maybe called people on, okay, that's got me what it's got me. But if things are going to shift, I might need to look at doing more. So maybe I'm up to doing 4 client appreciations. And here's the deal. I'm going to cut these expenses so I can afford to do 2 more client appreciation events per year because I know that's a better investment. I'm going to be purposeful about increasing my database, people I have in there. Maybe I'm going to join a couple of different groups, get involved here and there, and actually go back and build out my database and grow it. And then I've kind of haphazardly been doing, I don't know, half a dozen or 10 purposeful touches per year per contact. I'm going to double it. Right? All the things that you should be doing in your business that you don't do right now because you haven't had to. Because time is right. Absolutely.
Yep.
Awesome.
But here now, find me a pig hook. And I'll find a pig from one of my past clients. Put off her back part.
Smart.
Even when there's a little bit.
Just enough.
And I saw the tick numbers, people sign up with money.
Like your style.
And for all your real estate, you don't mind when I'm at.
Smart man. You know what they do that. Okay, so now so these are some of the different shift tactics we can do. One says get real, get right. This is about your mindset. You can't control the market, but you can control your outlook and your response to the market. What is that? The best way that I can encapsulate number one is a quote from Warren Buffett. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy with others. What does that mean?
That's how you want to pay.
Exactly. He loves insurance.
The government was fearful with titles. Government employee insurance. You know what that's good for?
I mean, I do know.
Warren Buffett says,
Because people were fearful about it, what did that do to the price of it? Brought it way below market. While others were fearful, he was greedy and bought because he knew that fear was driving down the price. And then he bought it.
he may just be, or not.
Yeah.
And go on, collect the payment.
What a novel idea.
The first one.
There you go.
All by. Would you like to?
There you go. The yellow up stuff. So, but really what that's saying is when you look at a down market, here's the deal. If you're prepared for a down market, it's actually something to be somewhat excited. Because there's a lot of opportunity that comes in an economic shift in which the value of things decreases, right? When do you think is a great time to invest in the stock? As it's bottoming out, right? Because that literally means you're buying everything, right? And oh, by the way, it's only those that have the capital at that time that are able to make those investments. People that don't have that capital or are fearful don't make those investments. So that's you getting your mindset right about, okay, it's a shift, it's going to suck, it could be hard. However, I'm prepared for it. I know what I need to do to be successful, and there will be opportunities that I can capitalize on. Remarketing your business. The number one determinant of surviving is expense management. What does it mean when we say to remargin your business? Right. Here's the deal. Most people do good real estate. we don't actually truly look at what our net profit is, right? Our net profit. What is net profit? Yeah, it's your net profit is how much money do you have after you paid all of your expenses and your taxes, right? Because we agents only ever look at or talk about their what? Yes, their, I was gonna write all out, but you said it. Your GCI, your gross commission income, because this number is more impressive.
Yeah.
Right? That gross commission income, right? But it does you no good to make $200,000 in gross commission income, but only have a net profit of 40 grand. And guys, that is a very realistic scenario for some people, right? Because they're not watching this. Because we're on, sometimes you're trying to get that net profit down as much as possible, pay taxes, right? But it is what it is, right? So, but what we need to do is, in times that are good, when you see that GCI, that gross commission income, very, very high, and you know you're paying your bills, you're making your expenses, you don't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention. But what you need to be doing, because that's what tells you your margin, right? Your margin is how much do you bring in, how much revenue do you bring in, and of that revenue you brought in, what percentage did you actually keep? Right, so just give you an example. If in a calendar year, you brought in $100,000 GCI, right, gross commission income, but your net profit was only 50 grand, that's your net profit, then what was your margin? What was your profit margin? 50%, right? Your margin, sorry, was 50% because you kept 50% of your gross revenue, right? Does anybody know, like in what's considered a good margin in business? What's that? Keeping how much of it? Not real estate. Not real estate. Not real estate. In business in general, what's considered a good margin? That's considered great. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying, because we're spoiled.
That's what Shark Tank tells you, okay?
We're spoiled because in real estate, we have the ability to have really good meaty margins, right? What's considered a great margin in the business industry is like 20%. What kind of margin do you think Walmart? What kind of margin do you think Amazon has? They're like probably talking about single-digit percentages in terms of their margin, but it works for them because of what? Volume. They do so much business that their margin can be a lot smaller and it can still be highly profitable. Just like company.
No, we're your ideal agent. We're not his guy.
So a 20% margin in the business industry is considered pretty good, right? But in our industry, it's not. If you're a single agent and you don't have any staff or anything, you could easily make $250,000 and have expenses, less than, right around 25,000. That's not including tax, right? Taxes, right? And so your net margin could be pretty good, pretty meaty, right? But as you grow, your margin might change. Right? So all this is saying is remargin your business and nothing. They're saying look at your expenses, cut the expenses you don't need, increase your margin, right? In this example, if you were running this example, you could shave off $10,000 in additional expenses, would you be remargining, increasing the margin by 10%, 260, right? But the whole reason you would be doing that is that if this saw a 25% decrease because of the shift in market, we increased your margin, so it really didn't impact you much. So, do more with less. I know that sounds stupid, but we get told to do this in the Army all the time. Build core competencies around what really matters and associate with people who are on the same page as you. What does it mean to say do more with less? What is that? Right. Do more with less. Can anybody think of anything?
I'm going to do it about don't haul 5 bulldozers and 4 earth. If I don't have enough drivers, I won't come right down with 2 of each.
Right.
We're done.
Don't bring me your nice to haves. Bring me what
Yeah.
the extra stuff that's kind of, just gotta ask more questions. Hey, do we really need that? For example, do we have papers from you right now? Right, but do I need to?
No.
You don't, you could argue, I don't necessarily, I'm just using that as an example. That would be a do more, we could do more business, I could probably do less. Right, if needed. Yes. Could you do digital staging section? I don't do. Call me.
I'm with her. I got
There
you go. She said, my realtor said I need another $600. I said, I sell new construction that doesn't have it. Buyers want to know the house is empty. That's going to be empty.
And their friends are like, shit.
It
nobody
makes-
wants to buy
It makes great conversation. I tell them, out of there. Put it all in storage and leave me in jail. You knew this was going to be interesting.
I love it. So do more with less. That's the moral of the story. Find the motivated. Nothing becomes more critical to success than finding motivated buyers and sellers during a shifting market, right? You don't want to waste your time. Right.
System for part of your life. Okay, what's part of your dad? Yeah.
You don't want to forget about them. But you need to be hyper tuned into the motivated. You know, lock them down because they're the ones who will continue to propel your business. Get to the table. The effort you get, that you give converting leads must match the effort you give to generate. What is that? The effort you give to converting leads, to converting them, must match the effort you use to generate them in the first place. Like what does that mean right now, especially in the great market? I'll give you an idea. Could you have it that in this market you have an agent who's doing very, very well, life is good, plenty of closings, money situation's fine, a lead comes in, a lead is generated, comes to the phone or to their email, and they don't necessarily get to it right there. Because they don't feel a sense of urgency. They don't feel a sense of urgency to hop on that generated lead and convert it because why? They feel no pain because life has been brought up. Right? Well, when you feel pain because life isn't good, when that lead is generated and comes in, and that agent doesn't have all the things I just talked about, well, how do you think they treat that generated lead when it comes to converting? Absolutely, they treat it very different, right? So that's what this quote is getting at. You have to put the same level of effort into converting that lead that you do into generating, right? Because that lead is generated somehow. You might have paid for it or what have you, right? But you like when that lead comes in, when it's actually generated, like that, this should be getting doubled down on the conversion. You can really master converting leads, and those that have mastered converting leads find it much easier to navigate the market that's shifting in that direction, right? Because it's all about who can generate them. But anybody can come across somebody who's looking by herself. But the question is, did you convert them and actually pick them up?
I skipped one from one of our sends us all sends us leads. Peterson, Minnesota, real estate investor wanted to spend no more than $100,000. So I skipped it. I didn't have time to sit on my desk here. And then they called me.
Oh, really?
Mr. Buckingham, you have to buyer on the line that would like to talk to me. This is the one I just swiped and skipped.
Yeah.
He came in the office yesterday afternoon after that out for 30 days. I wanted to meet you.
Okay, wow.
I had inside the agents and buyer rep and all that stuff. And I skipped you. I said, I'm sorry, I skipped you.
Hey, found you. That's
I
good.
told him the truth. And we had a chat on in regards to the property.
Yeah.
I know the property. Right now. He said there's no access to it.
Okay, there you go.
He said, you know the property? I said, yes.
Find
I've
good.
driven by it a couple of times. Somebody bought it a year ago and they're putting it back on the market. You know, we're like double the money.
Okay.
Pardon me? Well, it's got Highway 16 right on the side of it.
What happened?
But you found out that we shouldn't be skipping those because I'm trying to do multiple investments.
Well, it all depends on how busy you are, right?
I have many things on the table.
Yeah.
I
How
have,
much can you?
I have a new team member right there.
There you
I have
go.
a new team member right there.
Go.
Would they have skipped it?
That's what he's saying.
No,
They'll be able.
I didn't have time to get to them and they couldn't get to them.
No.
Okay?
Number 6, catch people in your web. A website is a tool for you to offer consumers what they want in exchange for what you want. It doesn't have to be a website. What does it mean when we say catch them in your web, offer them what they want, so you can get
Follow up with them.
it means dangling enough value to keep their interest or get to engage with you so that you can then lock them down, put them in your database, put them in whatever system you're using to contact them to eventually. Right?
What if I can show you a better position?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and this gets used on us all the time. What are some examples of catch people in your web? There's a huge one that happens every year in November on a Friday.
Deer season.
Oh, Black Friday.
Black Friday. That's a huge, massive attempt to catch people in your web, right? That's just a marketing ploy, right? We're going to discount a lot of stuff. Number one, to help us get in the Black Friday. Number two, when you come in and you sign up and you purchase whatever, you got all your data now. And you're getting all kinds of emails from us from here on out. In the web, yeah. Right. How many? Somebody give me an example. When you on your birthday, can you name at least one company that sends
Caribou.
what is it?
Little e-gram, and then you get a price.
Yeah. So what does that do?
I go there and get my price.
You go visit their web and they just caught you, right? Exactly. And you're going to come back for more. Any other companies out there? What's that? I get every birthday, I get a $5 or $10 gift card from Ace Hardware. Expires in like a month. But it's like, hey, happy birthday, here's $5 or $10 off, whatever. Right. And or usually I don't go there in time to use it, but I remember, hey, they're going to give me $5 or $10 off. That's all that matters. 1 or 2 restaurants typically low as well, right? So once you come happy birthday. So it's all about what do you offer? What's the kind of value you're dangling out to stay top of mind and to get that engagement, right? And then you have to ask yourself, what are my items of value? Do you have more than one? And are you staggering them out? Who truly benefits from the item of value? Just buyers and just sellers, because you have items of value that speak to the different segments of consumer, right? Price ahead of the market, we kind of talked about that for a little bit. That's pretty, obviously it's important. I don't think we're necessarily there yet. I think just right now, you just got to price in line with the market. I don't think we need to be projecting any downswings in price, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Stand out from the competition. Yep. Okay. That's, great. Pricing and staging are nice. But what are you doing to stay top of mind and demonstrate that value to clients, especially in a difficult market? Because when it's really a crappy market, clients are just or wise as you are. Trying to spell it properly. Create urgency. You can't create urgency if there isn't a good reason for it, and you certainly can't fake it. There's a good reason to call sellers right now regarding that. There's a good reason to call buyers right now regarding that. What are those reasons? For buyers, what's going up?
Interest rates, holy crap, better buy now. For sellers, what's going up? Interest rates, holy crap, buyers are falling by the wayside every day, becoming less competitive. I'm going to sell now for top dollar before we see them up. Right. That's how you create it. Yeah. And for me, there's not much. There's still cash for top dollar. Why? You want to go see them. Expand the options.
Affordability drives real estate. Affordability is the real estate.
What do you do? What programs out there? How can you help people afford it? Some of this happens in this market. And obviously, a lot of people really, you know, what relative you know, because when you're buying this thing, right? So this would be the inverse, right? In terms of if you're looking for help in creating financing, you're not getting assistance funds, or you're still going back to the same relatives, say, hey, interest rates are too high, it's taking us out of the mix. Can we buy with you and then figure out a refinance afterwards? So,
Master the market of the home. Seek the business. Seek the business because you've studied it, learned it, and can successfully do the work. Seek the business because you're able. This is, I think, a fancy way of saying those that were doing short sales and foreclosures back then, right? If you didn't know a thing about short sales, you probably shouldn't be messing with it, right? Are you? God bless you. That kind of makes me nervous because I haven't heard of short sales and foreclosures for a little while. But this is saying whatever becomes a niche or whatever becomes more prevalent in any given market that you're in, you might want to take time to study or get ahead of becoming known for it in anticipation of there being more, right? So there were agents out there that mastered short sales, and now they haven't had to do them for a while. They might be out of the business, or they just don't do them anymore. So that leads an opportunity. Same with foreclosures. That leads an opportunity for if this happens again, or they become a little bit more prevalent, you could be one of those people that steps into that master process, builds those relationships, and makes that a part of your business. Last but not least, bulletproof the transaction. We do our deals heads down, but we serve our clients heads up. I don't know what that means. Yeah, I think so. But we say absolutely, probably. I'm gonna go with that. But bulletproof in the transaction means, especially in a down market. Like here's an example of bulletproofing the transaction right now. I'm going to bring it right back to interest rates. Have any of you had a deal blow up because they didn't lock in their interest rate recently? Yeah. It happened a few months ago to a lot of people because they were not anticipating those rates going up, right? So that's an example of bulletproofing the transaction. Hey, when you know you're in a market, interest rates are fluctuating, they're going up sometimes by dramatic amounts. You need to be coaching your client and their lenders and say, hey, we've got it under contract, lock in the rate. Bulletproof that transaction. Don't leave it into the wind, or this, that, or the other. I mean, it's ultimately the consumer's choice, right? They'll do what they're going to do. But that might be a way or an example of, hey, we're going to bulletproof this transaction with it, lock in your rate so that you don't have an unanticipated change to it that blows up the deal up.
Per market. Yeah. Do you want to put a range in? Do you want to say 5 to 7? Right. To say it correct. Right.
What if it's a problem? Well, then what if it's one escrow and then they have to pay the rate extension and then that's another $1,000 that they don't have.
So no.
Well, it's happening.
But that's why you need to start looking at what are the things you should be doing to help them. So that brings us to about noon. I'll stop there. Pause for questions, thoughts, what have you. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah,
My pleasure doing this presentation.
yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'll be back to do some more of it because I had I don't know, I had a lot more slides to go, but well, way to put them on the spot there.